Hey, everybody, on the run with Beards and Dunn. And it's just Beards and Dunn today. We don't have a guest. We've kind of had a string of guests. And Beards, I don't know about you, but we've had awesome guests.
Oh,
And it has been a hoot, as you would say. I would
hasn't
say
it?
a riot. Because, when you start going through the list of people that you know and that I've gotten to know now through you, having Doug Curtis, Ron Tabb, Greg Meyer. And I got to admit, my favorite so far, they're all favorites. Patty
Right.
Catalano
Oh,
Dillon. She was
what a
something
ball of
else.
fire.
I tell you, if anybody's listening to this and you go, I might want to go back and listen to one or two of their podcasts to see what this is all about. Go to the Patty Catalano Dillon one, because you'll be laughing through most all of it, because she is something else.
Well,
like
and Patty's 71 years old. She's a ball of fire still. And, she's got that beautiful Boston accent.
Oh, she is so fun to listen to.
Yeah.
And you're right. She's 71 going on 21.
Right. That's about
like
it.
That.
And she's always
That's
been
so
like
cool.
that. I've known Patty for a long time, and she hasn't changed one bit. Still full of enthusiasm.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I was thinking that would be a great intro if you said, look up enthusiasm and motivation in the dictionary. There's a picture of Patty Catalano
Yeah,
Dillon.
absolutely.
So, well, anyway, and so, it's kind of an exciting time right now, with the Olympic trials coming up. And
Yes.
Beards, you and I as young college runners, our dream, let's just be honest, was to go to the Olympics. I mean, that was amateur athletes. Now if you're a basketball, football, baseball, your aspirations might be pro. Yeah, I'm going to be a pro, ball player. But for amateur athletes that were in the I'll call it non-ball sports, we didn't have a golf ball or basketball, football, anything. Our only ultimate dream
was the Olympics.
Yeah,
we're done.
Remember, get there.
Remember, you and I chatted about going out and living with my grandma out in Montana and training out there.
Yeah, we said, well, there'll be, and I remember laughing and going, what? We had no money. Well,
no.
You know what we'll do? We'll pump gas. This is back in the day when people still had a job pumping gas for other people.
Checking oil.
Check oil. Can I clean your windshield?
Right.
And you'd actually get minimum wage, because you and I were thinking, well, how much money do we need to live? Not much. Just enough to buy cereal and running shoes. And we had the running shoes covered, I think. But anyway.
We did. Those are the days.
How good we could get. And it's still the goal for many athletes today. And so the Olympic trials are coming up this weekend. And not only Olympic trials, but you're leaving. I don't know if people care. This will come out on a Sunday, but it's Friday. And Dick's leaving to head up to Grandma's Marathon this weekend.
Yes.
How many years? I just did a little research. That thing started in 1977.
Yeah, so this will be the 48th running.
Oh, my Lord.
Of the Grandma's Marathon. And I ran it for the very first time 43 years ago, 1981.
Well, we're going to get to that here in a little bit, because and I'm sure, we've talked about grandmas before, but I think it's worth going back and kind of going over it. But anyway, just real quick with the Olympic trials, I think my favorite are the distance events.
Mine too.
I was a distance runner. I love, the 1,500 meters. I'm going to be glued to the TV for that one, and the 5,000. But the first one for the weekend is the 10,000 meters. And what's kind of interesting is, at the Olympics, I think now I haven't really kept track the last few Olympics, used to, you had to qualify at your Olympic trials, and then you'd go, and they'd have so many runners that they couldn't put, 48, 50, 60 runners on the track. So they'd have heats like they do in most every track event to nail it down to in the sprints, it's the fastest 8. I think now they even leave 9 in. They have an extra lane on the track for the sprints. And so they have heats, they have semifinals, and the 10K had that. Frank Shorter, ran a outstanding 27:51 to finish 5th at Munich in the 10K. A lot of people don't realize that 3 or 4 days prior to that, he had to qualify the finals. He ran 27:55, if I remembered, to get into the finals, and then he PR'd again 4 days later. So he had to run 2 world-class 10Ks.
Well, and remember, he ran the marathon then at the end.
At the very end. So
and won.
What a great double. I mean, he had an outstanding Olympics. Well, this year, they've changed the rules. And I think a lot of guys, because they try to do the 5, 10K double. And if you have to do heats or, to qualify for the finals, it ends up being a heck of a task. A lot a lot of laps on the track, and scheduling becomes a
Oh,
nightmare.
brutal.
So they only leave in 27 athletes. It's a final only. They don't have heats for the 10K. You have to break 27 minutes for 10,000 meters. Now, Beards,
Dang.
to just wrap my head around that, is mind boggling, because I remember when the world record for the 6 mile was over 27 minutes,
Well,
but
and
10K is
done.
another quarter
Yeah.
mile.
And Alberto had the 10K record for a while. It was like 27:29. That was the
Yes.
American
And then
record.
it was Craig Virgin was in the mid 27s, and
Right.
those guys were like, we couldn't even dream of,
No.
man, breaking 28 minutes.
I
That's
know.
now to get to the Olympics, you have to break 27 minutes.
Oh
Well,
my
right now the
gosh.
U.S. only has 3 runners, and you have to do it within I don't know, a year prior to the Olympics. They
Something
have
like
a
that. Yeah.
period, that they open up, and you can submit your time and you're in. Well, we have 3 guys that have done it, who have broken 27 minutes, so they're in the top 27 in the world, but we still have to qualify at our Olympic trials. And
Exactly.
so these guys are going to be there. And actually, and Joe Klecker was kind of sad. He was right on the bubble, just a little over 27
Right.
minutes. And he was a former Olympian. He's been there
Yes.
before. It's son of Barney and Janice Klecker, and he's injured. I just read he had a
Oh, I
torn
didn't know
abductor.
that.
Yeah, torn abductor. If you
No.
if you do the splits, that abductor muscle better be really flexible, because that's
Oofta.
on the inside of your thigh. And
Dang.
I tell you, at his level, the kind of workouts and races and this, the conditioning these guys have, they're always on that fine edge
Well, and every
of,
time you lift your leg or move forward,
oh,
you're affecting that particular
well,
area.
and runners are such linear. We move straight ahead. Yeah, we might
Right.
turn on the track, gentle turn, but the abductor muscle keeps like if you ever do that butterfly stretch, you'll find out what your abductor muscle is real quick,
Right.
because that sucker is usually tighter than a tick, and then if you
Exactly.
bring your knees together, if you're sitting like that with your knees apart and you bring them together, that's the muscle. Well, he tore his, who
Oh,
knows, just running. When muscles fatigue, other muscles try to help, and
yep.
you can say it might have been a
Something
training
can
error.
break.
It could have been just stepped in a hole,
Right. You never
strained it.
know.
Yeah, and so it's hard to say. So that's kind of sad. Anyway, so the Olympic trials really kick off that first. I think it's the first day. There's the decathlon and all these, the
Right.
heptathlon for the women and stuff. But they usually do the 10,000 meters, because that way the guys that are trying to come back, and there probably will be like Grant Fisher and Nico Young and some of these
Like in the
guys who have
5K.
qualified. Yeah, they got to give them a few days and to kind of get over a hard
No
10K on
kidding.
the track. So I'll be glued to the TV, and it'll probably be on. Let's see, it's West Coast time, so it'll be like 2 a.m. here probably. When
I know.
no, I'll probably just wait till the morning and watch the replay. But so that's coming up really quick. But Beards, let's go back and do. We may have hashed Grandma's marathon before, and I just revel and enjoy. I get fired up just thinking about it. And help me, and for some of our listeners who maybe haven't heard the story before, but you had qualified to go to the Olympic trials in 1980, and you
Yep.
had a 220, or
Yeah.
going into
No.
it.
Yeah. 220 going into it.
Yep, 220.22, because I had a 220.31, and freaking Beards is 9 seconds faster than me. It just ticked me off. And so he goes to the trials. I was injured, didn't get to go, and I think, and you've said it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were going to run the trials, do your best you could, hopefully maybe get a PR. You never know. You
Yeah.
just give it your best shot, and then probably you were just newly married, and
Yeah.
start a career, kind of
Right.
maybe run for fun, that sort of
Exactly.
thing.
That was my whole plan.
So let's go from that was May of 1980.
May of 1980, and I went into it.
Take
I'd
it
been
away.
sick. I'd been sick all winter. They finally got diagnosed in like the end of March, first part of April, that I was super anemic. I mean, I
Right.
remember I ran a 25K race in Minneapolis, and I finished almost dead last. And I
And
was
you were training.
oh yeah. And finally my mom convinced me to go to the doctors, and I did. And long story short, I was very anemic. They got me on some iron supplements. And so I went but I kept training all that winter, still running 120, 130 miles a week, even though I was dead tired all the time. And so I go into the trials race in 1980 with the idea of, I'm just going to go out and run it so I can tell my kids, grandkids that, hey, your old man, ran in the Olympic trials. So I started out pretty conservatively for me. And I started feeling good. I got into a rhythm. I started passing people and done. There was a couple hundred runners that year in the trials, and I
Right.
finished 16th overall and ran 2:16:01. So I PR'd by over 4 minutes and done. I wasn't halfway through the chute. And I remember my first wife, Mary, was kind of running alongside the outside of the chute. And I looked at her, I said, I'm not quitting now. It was done. If I would have, maybe run another 2:20, 2:21 or something, we
Right.
probably wouldn't be talking right now.
Well, I
Honest to
think we would, but
gosh.
not on not on a podcast. Beards, and a lot of guys finish a marathon, and the first thing in their head is, "Why am I doing this? This is so stupid. I'm so you're so hard
Right.
hammered." You obviously you weren't anywhere.
Oh,
You were. I wonder if that race would have been another 3 or 4 miles. You would have kept going at exactly the same pace,
well,
right?
done. And I ran that race, and I mean, if you would have saw me come across the finish line, you thought I'd won the gosh dang thing. And then,
Well,
just a few weeks later, then that race was such a big difference in my running and my confidence. And then, a few weeks later, I ran the Jack 15 and was
hammered it.
was average under 5 minute pace and felt great. Like I felt like I remember when I finished that race, I thought, I think I can go another,
11
8, 9
miles.
miles at that
Yeah. Yeah,
pace.
you were running about 4:55s, I think, at Jack
Yeah.
that year, and so then you're on this roll, and my theory, and you and I have talked about it, was running anemic for who knows how many months. In fact,
Right.
our college coach Scott Underwood thinks you might have been anemic even when you were at SDSU back
I
in the late
yes.
'78. Because let's be honest, Beards, nobody was flush with cash. It wasn't
Nope.
like we were eating filet mignon or
Oh.
or supplements, vitamins. We didn't
No.
believe nobody did that kind of stuff. We just ate whatever you had, which is usually macaroni and cheese or
Well, and you
something
know what I
like
used to
that.
have for breakfast back then? I'd eat two of those Twister glazed donut things for breakfast because they were cheap. They were like a 25 cents a piece down at the local
filled
bakery.
filled up the empty spot, and you
Right.
got your oil change for you go get fresh oil. And so yeah,
Exactly.
who knows? You were training them for a period of time. And if people don't know, low iron is what carries oxygen in your blood, your
Yes.
hemoglobin. I just got mine checked yesterday, Beards. It was 817. When
Well,
my
that's
and
good.
yeah, oh, very good, really good. And my hematocrit was 51, which is high. Anytime you get above 50, they start suspecting you might be blood doping with EPO and stuff like that.
Ah,
Well, either it's because I still train a lot on my bike, or I might have been a little dehydrated, which I am chronically. I never drink enough fluids, which
no.
makes my red blood cells look a little thicker than they may actually be if I drank more water. But so my blood profile was good. Yours probably we didn't have blood profiles
But
back in
done.
the late
When I
'70s,
went
early
in
'80s.
finally to the
Yeah.
doctors, my hemoglobin was like it was under 9.
Oh yeah, that's
So,
like you start passing out when it gets that low.
oh, I mean,
No
I
wonder you were
remember
tired all the
remember we
time.
lived in them apartments and we lived on the second floor, and I remember
Right.
just walking up to the second floor. I was worn out, and then I'm
Well,
still running 100 plus miles a week.
and so I've always tried to figure out what made Dick better than all the rest of us. Not that that's a big deal, but this is what it is. But I'm kind of thinking, a lot of athletes go to altitude, 10,000 feet, live
Yes.
in there, so their body adapts to this stress. They don't have enough oxygen. The partial pressure as you go up in altitude is less, so there's less oxygen coming into your bloodstream, into your hemoglobin, and so you were kind of simulating
Yes.
even, and yet you had the mental tenacity. A lot of us would have said, this ain't worth it.
Well,
I'm
I came
exhausted."
close.
Well, but you'd made a commitment to yourself, and that's part of the. We talk about
Right.
talent. Well, part of talent is between your ears. Is there's stubbornness, and there's a stubbornness that gets you into trouble. We all know about that one.
Oh yeah.
And there's a stubbornness that makes you a champion because you're saying, I kind of appreciated Greg Myers' comment. He goes, every day in the Midwest in the wintertime to get up and go out for your run or workout outside is a decision.
Yeah.
And it
Right.
is. It wasn't a thought like, for you and me, I don't know. It was a pretty easy decision. I'm
Oh,
going.
we were going no matter what the weather was like.
I think a lot of people look outside, go on their phone, look at their app, and go, I think I'm
Yeah,
taking the
not
day
today.
off. And, I always remember Coach Squires at our running camp when somebody said something about a day off. He
Oh,
goes, day off, day on.
oh,
And I just,
I tell you what, that just gave me shivers done. I mean, I
oh,
remember at camp when he said that, and that of
oh,
all the
the
people we've had in,
emotion.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
Yeah, it made
and
everybody's hair in the back of their neck
it
stand up.
did.
And he was serious. Day
Yes.
off, day on. And like, because he
Yep.
said, look, if you're going to do this, you don't Mickey Mouse around. You don't make excuses. The weather is not an excuse. And, feeling bad, we'll get out there and give it a shot. And maybe after you
Right.
get out there, you cut it back a little bit, give yourself a break. But you don't just go, well, I don't feel it today. I think I'll just stay in bed or go
No.
watch TV. Anyway, and so I think your persistence through that anemia caused your body to do stuff for survival. We talk about capillarization, where your body actually opens up new arteries into your muscles because you're starving your
Yeah.
body of oxygen. So it's saying we got to do something to get more oxygen in here, and just your everything adapts to make your performance more efficient. So once you got the hemoglobin on board,
Oh,
we called it blood doping today. Now you didn't do that, but
no,
you
but
did it through natural. Um,
yeah.
it's kind of like survival of the fittest. You either were going to die or adapt, and you
Oh, and
adapted.
done. Once they got me on the iron supplements, within a couple of weeks, holy cow, I started
Well,
feeling like a young pup. Honest to
well, this is
gosh,
the
it was
thing.
amazing.
Let's talk about the roll. I call it you were on a roll. I think in your book you said I'm a locomotive or something like that. Because if you ever tried
Something
to
like
stop a
that.
locomotive that's got a full head of steam, it's going to take you a long time to stop that locomotive or something very, very big and immovable to stop this. You were on a roll. So you left the Olympic trials thinking, man,
Fired up.
I'm going to go again. And you showed up at Jack because I don't know if it was like, hey, it was in the neighborhood. You felt good. SDSU, let's go down to Brookings.
Yeah,
And it's a prestigious race. It was in those days. And, Ron
absolutely.
Dawes had won the dang thing 2, 3 times. Steve
Steve
Hogue had
Hogue.
won it.
Right.
Oh, you name it. There was a long list. You wanted your name on that list and you got it. Well, then you're going, okay, I want to find another race. And so you just ran 2:16, was it 01 or
Yeah,
something or 20?
1601.
Yeah. And so it's mid 1980. And so what happened after the Jack? Do you remember?
So after the Jack, I let's see. I ended up running New York City that
That
fall.
was
And I
it,
ran
not
a
to the yeah, the
yeah, but
fall.
I ran a lot of, the Long Lake Corn Days 4 miler, all those little races that little towns used to put
So about
on. And
every other
oh
weekend you found
yeah,
something. So it's
pretty
part of your
pretty
training.
much.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
part of my training. And then I went into New York City, and back then I was more concerned about trying to run a faster time. And so I'll never forget that morning. I had to pay my own way out there, but Fred Lebow said, if I get there, I can, ride on the elite bus, get a free entry. And I think he might have put me up for a couple of nights in a hotel. So I get out there, and the morning of the race, I'm writing my splits on my arm. And I got down to about mile 3 and I stopped and I thought, if I'm ever going to see if I can run with the big boys, forget about time and just be competitive. So that's the first time I really went into a race in a marathon where, okay, I'm going to hang with the leaders as long as I can. And, I did. I led, I actually took the lead at about 16 miles, and
I
I
love
finally got
Bill Squires had just kind of
oh
started working with you, hadn't he?
and yes, he did that summer of 1980.
So I love this story because, and Greg Meyer mentioned it. Squires wasn't a one to say we're going to shoot for a time.
No,
He said we're going to compete. You're going to
compete
run. You're
exactly.
going to and so I don't know if that had any influence on your decision, but I love when you come off of whatever
Oh,
bridge it was on
yeah.
First
So I,
Avenue.
I, I come off of Queensboro Bridge with about a 150-meter lead onto First Avenue, and the crowds are huge. In front of me, I've got like 5 motorcycles with their sirens blaring. In front of them is the ABC Wide World of Sports
Yeah, with
media
Greg
truck. They were,
Shorter.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Jim McKay. They were televising it, and I come down onto the First Avenue, and the roar of the crowd for that first runner, it almost buckled my legs. And I get about 100 yards down on First Avenue, and I'm flying, and I catch something off the right side of my eyeball, and I look over, and it's Coach Squires. He's sprinting alongside me with his Sunday go to church shoes on, and he starts yelling. He goes, "Dickie, what in the hell are you doing?" And I looked at him. I go, "Coach, I'm winning the New York City Marathon."
I've
And,
heard that story and I love it every time. And I can
and
imagine what Coach, did he say anything or don't you remember? Did
well,
he
by that
like,
time he was out of breath and faded in the crowd. So,
I love it.
but I finally got past at about
Yeah.
18 miles, but I finished ninth overall and ran 2:13:55 or
55.
56,
Yeah. Yeah.
and which was a new personal best. And again, I was so elated that I finished in the top 10 of the New York City Marathon,
Yeah.
and it was just
And
another
I've told the
springboard.
story, and I'm sure people are going to go, "Why do you keep rehashing these stories?" Because they're so good. I woke up that next morning after New York was over. I don't know if that was Sunday. I think it was a Sunday,
Yeah,
probably. And then we didn't have the internet, and I don't think you
right,
had called. Couldn't get a hold of you, and I figured, well, I'll hear from Beards when he gets home or something. But I thought, oh, wait
right.
a minute, New York City Marathon. And I lived in Country Club Estates in Sioux Falls. It was a very nice apartment building, and we were poor. I couldn't subscribe. I couldn't even afford the
No,
paper. And so my neighbor had the paper laying outside his door. It was an apartment building. They just throw the paper outside their door. So I went to go running that day. I thought, I'll just make a sneak at the sports page, So I tried to sneak over there so I don't make any noise. Like, God, if the guy would open the door and caught me, I would have just said, oh,
right.
he would have been all right with it. But I started looking, and Beards had the top 50. And I know I've told you, don't take this as an insult, but I started my
No,
finger on the 50th place.
I
I
don't
didn't
blame
start
you.
from
I
number
would have
one and
too.
work down. I thought, oh man, I wonder if Beards is in the top 50. And so I
Right.
started, going up, look, no, no, no. And when I got to about 20th place, I'm thinking, dang it,
He
son of a
didn't finish.
gun. Yeah, maybe, or his time was, I can't remember what 50th was that year, but it wouldn't have been a PR for you.
No.
But I got to ninth place, Dick Beardsley, Excelsior,
Oh,
Minnesota, 2:13:55. I don't know. I didn't yell, but I tell you, Beards, the adrenaline and the flow. I mean, I had a great run because I just could not. I couldn't fathom it. Now,
I
don't take
couldn't
that the wrong
either.
way. It's like
No.
how, because Beards just ran a 2:13 and got ninth in New York. All right,
Yes.
so you got off in New York, and that was in November,
Early November of
early November.
1980. Then, I
Then what
continued
happened?
to train. And then I
Yeah,
ran in 1981. I ran for the first time the Houston Marathon, where you were there. And
yeah.
I finished
Well,
second to Bill Rogers, about 30 seconds behind him at the finish.
and before that, we came up for Christmas, and I remember I was pretty
Yes.
fit, and you were obviously really fit. And I have a picture of you and me sitting on that couch, and we both look just totally wasted. I think I put this up one time on our blog, and I said, or I sent it to somebody. I go, "This is what 120 miles a week looks like," because
Right.
we'd get up, we'd run in the morning. You'd have breakfast, brunch, lunch, whatever. And you'd basically wait for the evening, the afternoon workout to roll around.
Yes.
Then we play
Maybe
games at night, watch
maybe
TV.
sneak a nap in.
Oh, and then repeat, repeat, repeat. And
Right.
we were putting in a ton of miles, but it was winter in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
Excelsior, and it was just nice, steady, or zone two, I guess you'd call it, where
Yeah.
it's just building the base, building the base, building the base. But then you showed up at Houston, I think it was January 10th, and you kind of were now a little more on people's radar. And
Little bit
so
more.
you came in, I know, a day or two ahead of the race. How did that whole
Yeah.
weekend go for you?
Yeah, so I came in a couple days early. They brought me in, and race day. It was I remember it was a cool morning. And remember, Dunn, the way the Houston Marathon was back then, it was out and back on
Two
a
loops,
like a on a cement highway.
a
And
freeway.
yeah, it was on the freeway. They closed down, and I mean, there was a who's who that year.
Oh, it was
And
fun.
Bill Rogers was there,
Jeff
Jeff
Wells.
Wells, John
Yeah.
Lodwick.
Ron
Herm
Tabb.
Atkins, Ron Tabb. I mean, you were there, and
Mhm.
it was just. And Bill Rogers and I, we broke away somewhere around 10 miles, and then Bill at about, I don't know, 18 miles, we ran by. Bill turns to me and he goes, "Yeah, I got to take a dump." And so
Thanks for
Bill
sharing.
Bill cuts across this field where there's a little patch of woods, takes his number two, and then he catches back up with me. And then,
Amazing.
gosh dang it, I had a little bit of a bad spot around 23 miles or something, and he gapped me, and I was closing back on him, but I think he ended up beating me, like, I don't know, by 25 or 30 seconds, something
Yeah.
like that. And again, I ran a 212 that year, 212:48 or 40, yeah, 40, 212:48
40. Yeah.
or something like that. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
again,
It was.
I was
I
I was ecstatic.
Oh, Beards. And when I crossed the finish line, because I PR'd, broke 220, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And I saw you sitting at a table, they were interviewing the top three. And I think
Right.
John Ludwig might have got third that day.
Yes.
John Ludwig, third at your Houston, third at Boston, then when you got second.
Right.
Well, anyway, and I looked at you and you were grinning, beaming. I go, Beards, how'd you do? I didn't know because I
Right.
ran 212 and I got second. And I tell you, I think I was more excited about that than I was about myself. But what
Oh,
a fun weekend we had that we both
wasn't it
PR'd
though?
and ran our best races up to that point in our careers. And so I was happy to get the heck. I remember the next day, and that's when I impersonated you. We'll skip that story.
But
That would
remember
be,
the night before, they took
oh,
us to
Gillies.
Gillies. Oh,
Oh,
was
that was a
that
riot.
fun?
That
Oh
was a
my
good time. And,
gosh.
it
Yeah.
was a who's who of distance running, getting bucked off electrical bulls. I
Right.
think you and I were the only two who were either smart enough or hadn't drinking enough yet to
Right.
not to climb on one of those dang bulls. Well, then Houston ended, and this just totally blew me away. Sooner got back to home, and you
Right.
got a phone call, a letter in the mail.
Yes.
What happened?
I get a phone call from the Japanese Athletic Federation, and marathoning in Japan to this day, even, but especially back then, is like the NFL football over here. People just, you are like, they worship their top marathoners over there. So they invited me to the Beppu Oita International Marathon. It was an invite only, and it's the oldest marathon in Japan. And there was only 88 runners in the
Wow.
race. So it was only 3 weeks after Houston, but I thought, man, Japan? Are you kidding? I'm going. So
And it was two
Mary and
tickets,
I,
right? Mary,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Mary and I went over there. They treated you like royalty, and went out that day. And me and the two Soul brothers, SOH, they were twins, and they were really two of their top runners in
Oh,
Japan.
they were
Well, we broke
209 guys.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, we broke away at about maybe 10K, 15K, and we run to the city of Owita all along, flat as a pancakes, along this highway along the bay of the ocean. So we get to Owita and make the halfway turnaround. We come through in
And
102.56.
103, yeah. Right around there,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so anyhow, we're running back towards Beppu, and I could see this wall of clouds coming in. Well, when that cloud hit us about 30 kilometers, oh, this front came through, and we had about a 25, 30 mile an hour headwind. So the two Soul brothers, they jump in behind me, and I thought, okay, that's kind of what we do. And then everybody takes turns. Well, at every quarter mile. Well, pretty soon a quarter mile goes by. They're sucking off my back, a half mile. After about a mile, they're still right on me, and now I'm getting worn out. So I motioned to them to come by. I kind of take my hand and wave for them to come by, and they both shake their head no. So then I started weaving like I was a drunk sailor back and forth along the road. And I remember the Japanese announcer in the TV truck goes, busy son, he gone cuckoo. And they followed me. So when I
I
would
know.
weave, they'd weave right behind me. Finally, at about 35K, I came to a complete stop, and they went by me, and then I tucked in behind them. And with a mile to go, I was in the middle, one Soul brother on each side of me, and they turned and said something in Japanese. And at that point, I mean, I was out of gas. They took off and put like 45 seconds on me in the last mile, but I got third and ran 2:12:41 that day.
Another PR, another personal
Yeah.
best. And I know I've seen footage of that. You had a beta tape. I always remember it was
Yes.
beta. It wasn't VHS. And so
No.
when you first got it, back in the day, somebody always had a beta player. You could. Now
Right.
I don't know whatever happened to that tape. I think you said
I
you
don't
loaned it to
either.
somebody,
I loaned
and
it and never got it back.
what was crazy about the tape of from Beppu Marathon, it was all in Japanese. There wasn't a
Yeah.
freaking word of English other
No.
than Beardsley-san. Every now and then you hear him
Right.
say Beardsley, and you knew they were talking about you. And so it was kind of fun to watch because everything you just described, you could have seen it, and so it's
Yeah.
probably out on YouTube somewhere. Okay, so then that was February of '81. So you
Right.
come back from Beppu.
Come back from
What's
Beppu.
next?
So then I get a call from the New Balance shoe company who I ran for, and their European distributor, Chris Brasher, who was an Olympian and I think a gold medalist in the steeplechase in 1956. He was starting this new marathon called the London Marathon. So he calls New Balance and says, "Hey, do you got any athletes that might want to come and run this first London Marathon?" Well, they called me and I thought, London? Never been to England before? Heck yeah. So, and I recovered quickly back then.
And
So I went to,
there was no talk of like, oh, and we'll pay him money. No, was that part of
no,
it? No, I didn't think
no,
so.
done.
Not at that time.
No, they put me up and they brought me over, flew me over. Maybe New Balance flew me over. I can't remember, but they put me up in a little hotel. The bed was so short, I had to sleep in the, curled up position. And they gave
People
me enough money to buy a couple of hamburgers, a day to eat and stuff. And I was tickled pink.
be there.
And that day, you know, the first London Marathon, I was fortunate, along with Inga Simonsen from Norway, we tied. We finished dead heat, and we both ran a 2:11:48 that day. And I was, again, it was a fortunate, another personal best, and it's a race I'll never forget.
Oh, it's awesome. And that London Marathon has grown now to be, if not the biggest,
Oh,
one of Berlin,
right,
London. There's only a few that you can name off the top of your head. Boston. Okay, so again, this locomotive that started not even a year earlier, because we're
right.
talking May of '80. You ran
Yes,
2:16. Now you're running and winning London Marathon in 2:11.
right,
All
right.
right.
And
So London ends. I hate to rush it.
London ends. No. Well, yeah, our
May.
time's going by here quickly.
Yeah.
So London ends, and I'd already worked out a deal with Scott Keenan, the race director for Grandma's Marathon, to come and run there. And, I was going to get a free entry, a hotel, and I think he paid me like $500 or something like that,
Oh,
which, back then that was,
that's a big deal.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that was
Nobody
good
else was
money.
getting
So,
that. Yeah.
no. And Gary Bjorklund, who hopefully we're going to have on our show one of these days. Gary was the defending champion. He did not run the Olympic trials in 1980 because of the boycott. So he was so irritated by that. He went to Grandma's Marathon in 1980 and soloed, won the race in 2:10:20. So he's back in the race.
Uh-huh.
And it was a perfect day in 1981. And the reason we're talking about Grandma's now, the 48th running will have just been over after when we post
This podcast comes up.
Yeah, this podcast. And but in 1981, I mean, done. It was the most perfect day to run a marathon. It was 48 degrees at the start, 48 degrees at the finish, no wind, a little mist and fog rolling in off of Lake Superior. It was, if anybody complained about that day, they're just complainers. You couldn't have asked for a nicer day.
And you had a partner for the
I
first.
did. So, so the race takes off, the gun goes off. Bjorklund and I, we go right to the front. And I get about a quarter mile down the road, and I had a terrible habit back then. I looked behind me. The fog was so thick, I could not see anybody else. And BJ, that's his nickname for Gary Bjorklund, BJ turns to me and he says, "Beards, it's just you and I, buddy, but it's your race. I'll help you however I can." Of course, my first thought is, okay, the guy's a defending champion. He's an Olympian, 2:10 marathoner. The guy's setting me up for the kill is what he's doing,
Well,
So, of course, I get about 4.5 miles, I get a terrible side ache. And I'm trying to rub it without Gary seeing it and stuff. And finally, it was so bad, I turned to him, I said, "BJ, I got a terrible stitch in my right side." He goes, "Beards, no problem. We'll back off the pace a little bit. Up the road at 5 miles, there's an aid station. Take a little drink of water. You'll be fine." So we backed it off a little bit. Sure enough, I get up there, take a drink of water, and within the next quarter mile, it was gone. So we're running along, and I noticed BJ, the course kind of meanders,
Oh, curves. Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I'm running right down the gosh dang center line of the old highway, and BJ's cutting all the corners. Finally, he comes out to where I'm at. He goes, Beards, you big cob. He calls me, he goes, Beards, you big cob of corn. He goes, if you keep running down that center line, you're going to run a lot more than 26.2 miles. So I started, taking the inside turns like it's measured. So we go through halfway in 104 and some change, 104.35 or 36. And BJ turns to me and he goes, Beards, you got a 209 going. And I remember I started laughing and I turned to him, I go, well, how about we just stop right now and just double our time? Of course, you can't do that. So anyhow, we're coming off the old highway and we're just about 18 and a half miles. And we're about a half mile from getting into the city limits where the crowds get real big. Well, again, my terrible habit back then, I turned to look to see if anybody was coming. I could not see anybody as far as I could see behind me. I turned back around and BJ's like 30 yards in front of me and he's flying.
Made
And
a
I'm
move.
thinking, that son of a gun, he was setting me up. He wanted to wait till we get in, almost to town. The crowds will start cheering for him because he's a defending champion. Plus, he grew up in the Duluth area. So I take off, but I don't catch him until 19 miles. And I thought, okay, I got to make him hurt. So I throw in a hard surge and I get to mile 20 and a volunteer on a bike comes up and he goes, Beards, you just ran a 4:42 mile, but BJ's only 10 yards back. And I look back and sure enough, he was still there. So I throw in another hard surge. I get him to the 21st mile and the cyclist comes up. He goes, Beards, you just ran a 4:36 mile and BJ's hurting. And I'm thinking, BJ's hurting? I think I'm going to have a heart attack. And I remember looking back and I could see BJ's head was kind of dropped down and his arms were hanging a little bit. So I thought, okay, I got him in the hurt bag, but I better back it off a little bit.
Right.
So I go up Lemon Drop Hill and I get to the top and I start coming down the other side. And I look at my little watch that I was
Casio. Yeah.
Casio or whatever it was back then that I was wearing. And the battery had died. Well, I have no idea where I'm at on the course. Back then they didn't have all these big fancy markers and stuff.
Every mile. Yeah.
Yeah, there was no pace vehicle in front of us or anything like that. So anyhow, I get down where it flattens out onto Superior Street, coming in through downtown Duluth, and the stitch is back on my right side, and I mean it is nasty. So I'm rubbing it. I'm piercing my lips, blowing air through it. I'm grunting like a grizzly bear, trying to get it to go away, and I can't. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the whole field's going to go by me. Now, I'm still moving at a pretty good pace, but I mean, I feel like I have a bear trap. But I knew this. I knew that if I could get to the Radisson Hotel where I was staying, it's a big circular hotel in downtown Duluth, and you take a sharp left-hand turn there, there's a mile to go. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if I can get to that corner, I don't care how bad I'm hurting, nobody's going to beat me. So I'm piercing my eyes through the fog, trying to, see that hotel, and I can't see it. And I'm hurting. Well, finally, I can see the outline of it. So I'm thinking, okay, just get to that corner. So I'm getting closer and closer. And now I can see everything pretty well. I can see the corner where I took a left-hand turn. And I look down there and there's a little kid in the middle of the street playing with his little Tonka toy truck. Now, back then, only half the road was closed off. The other half had traffic coming on it. So I'm thinking, well, surely mom and dad's going to get the little kid off the street. So I'm getting closer. I'm about 50 yards away now. He's still there. Now I'm about 40 yards away. So I start yelling, the kid, get the kid out of my way. Nothing happens. Now I'm about 30 yards away. And now remember, I got a stitch, but I'm still moving at a pretty good pace. Finally, that little kid, he reaches down, he picks up his little Tonka toy truck, and he starts making it across the road. Well, he gets about a quarter of the way across. Now I'm 15 yards from him now, and he stops, looks at me, and freezes. So at this point now I'm thinking, what am I going to do? If I go to my right, I'm going to run into the traffic.
Cars.
If I go to my left, I'm going to run into the crowd and that big lamppost on the corner. Or do I take the kid out? At that point, my only option was to take the kid out. And I remember I ran into that little kid and he went flying off into the crowd. And I remember looking back and I heard him cry. And I'm thinking, well, that's good. At least he's still breathing anyhow.
He's not dead.
But done. It made my stitch go away. And I'll never forget this. I came around this last turn to the last straightaway to the finish line, and the crowd is going nuts. And people are shouting, you're going to break 210, you're going to break 210. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about? Remember, my watch, it was blank. So I'm getting closer and closer. Now I can see the finish line clock up on the scaffolding at the finish. And I'm thinking, well, did Scott Keenan, the race director, forget to start the clock or what? But anyhow, I come across the finish line, ran 209:36.6, and I was done. I was jumping up and down like a little kid that just got a new train set, for Christmas. My mom and dad were inside the finish chute. My dad was crying. My mom was crying. I was crying. It was a day I'll never, ever forget. And it was the first time my mom and dad had ever seen me run a marathon.
And there's the classic shot of you coming in and you get both arms raised in the air. I think it's on the cover of the book or something like that.
It is.
Right. And so, the look on your face just speaks volumes. And so again, I've got goosebumps just sitting here thinking about it. Here we are in June of 81. And just to remind everybody, a year earlier, May of 80, you had your breakthrough at the Olympic trials. And you've run 5 world-class marathons in a year and just missed the American record like by 9 seconds of Bill Rogers.
Right.
And so, it was such an exciting time. And you're heading to Grandma's today for the race this weekend. Before we get on here, we're gonna kind of wrap up here. I did a little research on Grandma's. I really had never done this before, but you type in Grandma's Marathon, Wikipedia comes up and all this. And it talks about 1977, first race, 150 runners.
I know.
150 runners. They had a budget of $600. They said the Grandma's restaurant was the only person in town that stepped up and said, I don't know if somebody approached them and said, we want to do this race. We need to buy numbers.
Scott Keenan did.
Yeah. And they go, well, nobody, after getting the door slammed in his face, he finally got Grandma's restaurant and said, well, how much are we talking? And he goes, I can do this for $600. And they go, well, you got to put our name on it, right? And they go, yeah.
And they wouldn't even give Scott permits, so he just ran it without having any permits or nothing.
And he's written a book. I'm going to have to check into that about
it's a great book.
Of the Grandma's Marathon. Well, and then BJ ends up winning the darn thing, like 221 plus for BJ. Coming off it's kind of a nice long hard run. I mean, that's
all it was
marathon.
For him.
The women's winner, 3 hours, 23 minutes, 39 seconds. Wendy Hovland. I don't know if Wendy's still around. If she's the first winner, Wendy Hovland, Hovland, 323. Nothing. Hey, bless her heart. I wonder how many women.
No kidding.
1977, northern Minnesota. I hate to make it sound like we're a bunch of male chauvinist pigs, but how many women were running marathons in the mid 70s in the Midwest?
Not many at all compared to today. That's for sure.
And not to brag, I ran the Black Hills Marathon in 79. And won it in like 220. And the first woman was like about the same time. It was about in a 3.
Yeah.
I remember going out to watch her thinking, man, she'd been out there an hour longer than I had. And it was hot. And I respected. I mean, those athletes that are out there for 3.5, 4.5, 5 hours.
Darn right.
Man, they're getting their money's worth out of that thing. Well, anyway, the race is now over 10,000. Oh, if you add the 5K, the half marathon, it's way over 10,000 runners.
Oh, it's done. It's right around 20,000. Yeah.
$2 million budget to put that thing on every year. So, Grandma's made a pretty wise investment when you think about for $600 getting the title sponsorship. It brings in,
absolutely.
I can't even imagine. And, Beards' time, 209. Oh, Beards, they rounded it up to 37. Sorry.
I know, because it was 209:36.6.
That time lasted for 33 years. Nobody ran faster.
I know, it's hard to believe.
A lot of runners went to that course because it was known because of the it's a fast course. And you always said it was fast because it's not flat. And
Right.
the hills are, and I ran it a couple times. The hills aren't steep enough. Like, they just hammer you like Heartbreak Hill,
No.
but it changes your stride pattern a little bit,
Yes.
your muscles, instead of getting locked into that same rhythm or whatever you would,
Absolutely.
things change, and it's kind of nice on the body, I think, that way. There's been multiple winners. You're one of, there's been four guys that have won it twice: BJ, you, Ron, Doug Curtis, a guy named Wesley Nagatic, I'm
Yeah.
beef that up, Dominic
Enduro.
Enduro. He's won
He's
it
the record
twice.
holder.
He's the record holder. 209.06, and he came back and ran a 209.34. Wow.
Right.
And
Now
then
he's and yeah.
and then I can't say Barno, Barno, Alicia,
He's won it
five-time
like
winner,
five. Yeah.
five-time, and a 209.14. And he won it four times in a row from 16 to 19, and he won it last year.
I
And,
know.
and
The
so
guy is incredible.
unreal. Now, I don't want to ignore the women because we mentioned Wendy won it. Well, then it didn't take long, and Lorraine Moeller showed up. Now, I don't know if Lorraine
Yes.
Moeller and Ron Dawes, they were married at one time. And
Yes,
so
back
that
then
might have
they
been,
were.
she won it 3 years in a row and broke 230, ran 229 in I think it was 81.
Yep.
There's been multiple, another interesting little tidbit, Barney Klecker. And maybe we could get Barney and Janice someday to visit.
We got to get him on.
Well, he won Grandma's in 78, the second year they had it.
Yeah.
Ran real good, ran a 218.42. Well, then in 1987, 9 years later, his wife Janice wins it in 236,
Yep.
02, I think it was. And she went on to win the Olympic trials. I can't remember what year it was, probably
1996.
90. Oh my gosh. So Janice was running, she ran well for a long, long time. There's been a three-time winner named Mary Akor, Kenyan, Akor.
Yep.
And then Dakota Lindworm. Now, you kind of got to know her a little bit. She's won it twice, and she's got the second fastest time ever with a 2:25.01. The course record, I can't think of the gal's name right now.
Kellen
is,
Taylor.
Yeah, 2:24.
Kellen Taylor.
Yeah.
2:24.28. Yep.
It's kind of too bad, Dakota obviously won't be there, I don't think, this year with the Olympics coming
Well,
up.
she's actually going to be there, Dunn. They're having a big deal. In fact, that's why I got to leave early. They're having a big welcoming thing to her at the Grandma's Sports Bar, and they're trying to raise money for her family so that they can go to Paris to watch. And then
what a cool
she'll,
deal.
yeah, and then she's running the half marathon, and then Friday afternoon, my wonderful friend Carrie Tollefson, a Minnesotan and an Olympian, her and I always do the Dick and Carrie show at 4:00 in the afternoon Friday at the Expo, and we kind of do an interview process. And Dakota is one of the people we'll have on stage and talking to her about what's coming up in Paris. And yeah,
I can't wait to hear about. And then we could talk about the Gary Bjorklund half marathon. I'm just going to mention Meb Keflezighi's got the record, 101.22.
Right.
But an SDSU runner, Joe Renshaw, won it last year in 102
Yes.
change. And so we've got some connection there with that. Well, Beards, our time always flies by whenever I chit chat with you. And we always kind of go, well, I don't know. What are we going to talk about? I don't know. We don't, we always, I'm afraid we'll get to like 15 or 20 minutes and just sit here and stare at each other someday.
Well, Dunn, you and I have been best buddies for getting close to 50 years. And I tell you what, you and I, we never have anything. We never
run out of
are at a loss for something to talk about. So
I know. I enjoy your company, and I hope it's both ways. And so when you're at Grandma's, have a great time. Obviously, if you see anybody that I might know that you think, say hi to them for me. And Beards, have a great trip to Grandma's. Be safe. And I look forward to hearing more. We'll talk about it next week, how it went.
Oh, yeah.
What went on.
Yeah, right? We'll talk about it and maybe go over who the winners were and stuff. And we want to thank everybody for listening today. And if you have any questions for Dunn or myself, comments about the show, you can contact us directly at our website at beardsanddunpod.com, or you can leave us a comment on our Facebook, Instagram, or X, all at Beards and Dunn Pod.
Yeah, and if you go to YouTube, we'd really appreciate it if you subscribe or hit the comments or whatever. Hey, Beards, have a great weekend, bud.
Hey, you too, Dunn. Have a good bike ride, you and Karen K.
Oh, yeah, we're heading out here shortly. All right.
All righty. Bye-bye.